Good morning and welcome everyone to round 4 of the Daniel Ricciardo Series. We're here in Northampton at the Whilton Mill circuit, a fairly new circuit in terms of British kart racing, built in 1991, just over 1,200 metres of tarmac for the drivers to navigate their way around here this weekend, and they've also got the added pressure of the wet weather conditions. It did have a little rain this morning. We had a little sprinkle as we were out on the track walk, and the circuit is still slightly damp, so we expect the drivers to be on the wet weather tyre. Earlier this morning I headed out onto this Whilton Mill circuit just to take a closer look at the challenges that await the drivers this weekend. The green flag is waved by the star official, and the drivers are on their way, or some of them are on their way. Let's just see how many do jump out of the paddock and go straight onto their merry way. Will they all come? No, there's a couple I can certainly see. Tom Snape isn't even sat in the kart at the moment. There's at least one kart that's still on the stand, which is the 319 of Tommy Welsh. So the rest of them are on their way. Let's just keep an eye on a couple of these drivers. What you will notice is that the racing line significantly changed in the wet weather, and what the drivers are trying to do there is they're trying to effectively avoid the rubber. They're trying to avoid the dry racing line, because the dry racing line is filled with this dark tarmac, this rubber that effectively comes off the tyres and lays itself down onto the circuit. Now, with anything that is rubber, it is effectively waterproof. You put water onto rubber and it usually just rolls off the top of it. Well, that exactly the same happens here in the wet conditions. The water effectively skims across the top of the rubber, making the rubber even slippier than the other areas of tarmac around the track. So you'll see the drivers just trying to avoid that dry racing line. They usually just go past it on the way into the corner, which gives them a better opportunity to turn the car into the corner. You'll see it there a little bit late, a little bit round the outside, these drivers, as they head up towards turn 3. So up towards the Christmas corner, which is where you're seeing now. The drivers tend to go around the outside. It gives them a little bit more traction. The other thing you'll see is that drivers turn the steering wheel, and for a moment or two, the car just goes straight on. That's what we refer to as understeer. Effectively, the tyres are told to turn in a certain direction, but they have to wait a moment or two until they get that mechanical grip from the surface. They react to the surface, then they get that grip, and then into the corner they go. And that's a challenge that the drivers have to overcome in these wet conditions. Seen a few different lines already around this circuit. So just the 8 drivers out there at the moment. The fastest of those 8 drivers so far is Elliot Stanley. And now Sam Faulkner. So Faulkner has completed his second flying lap and completed a 1:02.894, which is just around 0.3 of a second quicker than Elliot Stanley. Mark Lawrence is second fastest. We've got a couple more drivers just heading out onto circuit now, so we'll have a full complement in just a moment as Tommy Welsh has joined the session as well. We've had a quarter of the session's distance so far. And interestingly, the drivers have got one spinner at the top into Christmas corner as well. Here's a replay. Oh, just got it a little bit wide, didn't he? So what he did was he caught the rumble strip on the left-hand side of the corner, the right-hand side of your picture. There is absolutely no grip when you get out onto obviously the gravel and the grass. And you get off the tarmac in these wet conditions, you are effectively a passenger. That you have very little grip indeed. So then, are the drivers going quicker every lap? It does look that way, as Stanley's done a 62.607. That's the fastest lap, and he demotes Faulkner down to second. Lawrence is third, and Jack Rigg is fourth. Matthew Pearce just moves up into fourth with his personal best, and Tom Snape has moved up a couple of places into sixth as well. So 1 minute and 2 seconds is around about the time that we're after. And they're all congregating on the same part of the circuit as well, pretty much. The start-finish line is fairly quiet at the moment, as we see them wrestle with the car. We've got another spinner as well on the way in. It's the 319 of Tommy Welsh. So Welsh, I think he was the one that did it a lap ago as well. It just shows you how slippery it is on the way in. He got the back end, certainly locked the back wheels up. The back end stepped out and he couldn't quite recover it. He has rejoins, but he's currently the slowest driver on circuit, 9th fastest so far. He's only completed one flying lap at the moment. So just needs to keep things neat and tidy and keep it on the island more than anything else. Nice and neat and tidy from Elliott Stanley there through the Christmas corner. He heads down towards these two right-handers and then down to Ashby, which is where he is now, and up the Kenny straight into the left-hander at Parker and then the left-hander at Chapman, the Chapman corner, which is where he is now. This is the one where we spoke about earlier on. The doesn't quite open up on the exit. And then into the boot, which is this final series of corners. Left, then it goes right, right again. And then they head down to the pits bend, the paddock corner. Then they squirt the throttle and head down over start, finish once more. The last couple of corners remind me of Lark Hall. I know some of you will be well aware of the West of Scotland Kart Club. Very, very similar in terms of how the last couple of corners pan out. The first corner as well, the fast left kink. There'll be some quick entries into there when the start of these races later on today. We've got a spinner as well. In fact, we've got a spinner from Matthew Pearce. So Pearce probably pushing a little bit too quickly on the way. Just look very, very slippery on the way into the pit corner. Here is Sam Faulkner then. So Faulkner's now fastest on circuit. Faulkner's just done a 61.643. That's half a second quicker than everyone else. So Sam Faulkner's found a little bit of grip out there that nobody else has found. You can just see a little bit of spray being kicked up as well from these Daniel Ricciardo karts. And Faulkner has a very different line into the bootleg than the rest of the drivers. He takes a huge clump of inside curb, tries to cut the corner. He's a little bit wide on the exit. I wonder how lenient the officials will be today with track limits, just down to the pure slippiness of this circuit. As Faulkner makes a little error, does he? In fact, Faulkner's got a problem. So Faulkner is off and stationary. We've got a yellow flag into turn one, which is where Faulkner has parked up. Now he's gloved straight off here, so I wonder if has he thrown a chain? Something terminal, certainly for Sam Faulkner. Let's have a look. A little bit sideways. Turns into the corner and then just loses drive. So, strange one. See if we can find out what has happened to Sam Faulkner. He is coming away from the car. It's parked it up on the inside. It's in a fairly safe place, so we probably don't need to have that yellow flag there anymore. Faulkner will trudge his way back to the paddock where he will, his team will recover that kart for him. Now then, so Faulkner then, fastest out there at the moment, but out of the session. The session has still got 2.5 minutes to go. So the likes of Mark Lawrence, Elliott Stanley, Matthew Pearce, Tom Snape all have a chance now to try and get on top of this session, whilst the current fastest man can do nothing about it, because Faulkner's parked up on the way out of turn one with some sort of technical problem. Now then, what have the likes of Mark Lawrence got? So Lawrence has done a 101.873. He's 2/10 slower than Faulkner, so he needs to find 2/10 around this Whilton Mill circuit. He's heading into the bootleg now. Much wider than Faulkner was. There's a big difference between the lines that these drivers have taken. He clips the curb on the inside. A little bit of understeer as he heads down the short straight before paddock corner. Into paddock corner now. A little bit of oversteer. What is the time as he crosses the line? Does he go faster? He does. Lawrence, a 101.472. He is now the fastest driver on circuit, and Faulkner's not just gone from first to second. Faulkner has gone from first to third, because Elliott Stanley, a 101.537 for him. So Lawrence, Stanley, Faulkner and Pearce now in fourth place. Jack Rigg is 5th. Tom Snape is 6th. Dave Burns 7th, but some 2 seconds off the pace compared to Mark Lawrence. Oliver Owen is the 8th fastest driver. Then Tommy Welsh, who has managed to get a couple of flying laps in, but not an awful lot. I'm not sure if he's still circulating either at the moment. So whatever the technical problem was for Sam Faulkner, it's led to him being demoted from the fastest driver. And we thought that this session, as this session went on, we thought that the circuit would get quicker. There's certainly a lot brighter, a lot more break in the clouds at the moment. And we are seeing the drivers go quicker, not with every lap, but certainly not far off, as Lawrence does another fastest lap for him, a 1 minute .764. That's some 7/10ths quicker. Lawrence is flying out there at the moment. Certainly adapted to the conditions better than everybody else has. Takes the outside line through the Asbury corner. So the checker flag is out. Does anybody go faster on their final lap? Does anybody go faster as they break the beam? We're going to get Lawrence is going to come round now. Can he go even faster? Can he compound the misery for the ones ahead of him? He doesn't. No, it's still a 60.764. He's only just slower, only 100th of a second slower. What has the likes of Tom Snape got? He's coming round now to complete his fastest lap, his final lap. Does he go faster? Yes, Snape goes 3rd. So Snape up to 3rd on his last flying lap. What about Matthew Pearce? Pearce goes 2nd. So there is quicker times to come at the end of this session. Lawrence then is fastest, but Matthew Pearce just about gets on the front row into 2nd place. He is some 6/10ths quick slower than Mark Lawrence, who's been undoubtedly the class of the field in these wet conditions. Elliott Stanley into 3rd. Tom Snape 4th. Sam Faulkner demoted all the way down to 5th. Now I wonder how quick he would have been able to go if he hadn't had that technical problem earlier on. I'm sure we'll find out about that when we speak to Sam Faulkner later on today. But the DRS125 qualifying result, subject to any post-race scrutineering checks, of course, is that Mark Lawrence is the fastest driver of the pack. As we just see, it just looks like he stops. Just seems to lose all drive. Now, he hasn't hit a curb or anything like that, so I'd be surprised if he's thrown a chain. Could be anything. It could be something to do with the carburettor. It could be to do with it could be absolutely a whole host of things, but we will find out later on what the issue with Sam Faulkner was. So Lawrence fastest then, the number 230. Matthew Pearce, the number 2, 2nd fastest. Elliott Stanley 3rd. Tom Snape 4th. Sam Faulkner 5th. Jack Rigg was the 6th fastest driver. There's quite a big gap here between certainly the fastest driver, Lawrence, some 6/10ths quicker than everyone else, but then the gap between Pearce and Snape is Pearce, Snape, Faulkner, Stanley, all within a couple of tenths of each other, and then a further 6/10ths back to Jack Rigg, and then a further second or so back to Dave Burns. So we have got quite a big gap between some of our DRS125 drivers. They'll next be on circuit just around about 5-1 for their first heat of the day, and in just a few minutes' time, just around about 12, 10 minutes or so until we see the first time that we see the DRS 100s. What I can tell you is that I'm just looking at Sam Faulkner's kart, which is being pushed past us here over the start-finish line, and there is a chain hanging down. So he has thrown a chain as he's gone through turn 1. I wonder why. It certainly didn't look to hit a curb, didn't Sam Faulkner? But I can see from here, you just look at the left tyre, and below the left tyre is a chain, which is certainly not hanging in the way it's meant to hang off that car. Obviously, the engine is attached to effectively the rear wheels and the rear axles by a chain, which is attached to a sprocket, which drives the power from the engine through the back axle, through the back wheels. All these karts, of course, are rear wheel drive. And that was what put paid to Sam Faulkner's qualifying session. We'll be back in just a moment then, 5 minutes or so, for the DRS 100 qualifying, our final qualifying session of the day for our junior category. We will see you in just a few moments' time. So down here on the DRS 125 grid, lots of talking points at the moment, certainly from the DRS 62 race and the track conditions and the fact that we are now certainly heading towards the slick tyres. I'm looking down towards the DRS 125 drivers. They're all on the slick tyre, and we're going to jump straight in and try and grab a chat with Mark Lawrence. We'll just shift Andy Cox out of the way just to try and grab Mark if we possibly can. Mark, that was as good a qualifying session as you could have hoped for.
Absolutely, yeah. After yesterday, I'll take that, thanks, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And mastered the conditions the best. Is that an experience thing? As one of the veterans of
I think it's an experience thing. I'm carrying far too much weight these days, and yeah, the dry's not going to be good for me, so it's just defending this position basically from here.
Well, that's fine, but you're out the front with the best possible chance to do it. Andy said I had to do the rude thing and ask you your age and how long you've been competing in this sort of series.
In this series, I mean, this is my 15th season in this series. I'm 57. I want the old boys to come back because I'm feeling a bit like an old boy.
There's still time for me and you, Andy, at this rate.
You could have bought a Ferrari or a McLaren by now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Instead, I'm driving a Berlingo van, but there you go.
But what a fantastic advert for the series and a fantastic advert for the enjoyment of motorsport, absolutely. Just talk to us about the conditions, because obviously I know you will have mostly all been watching the DRS 62 race, and when the tyre change came, pretty much everybody has gone for the slick tyre. How comfortable are you with that?
I'm pretty comfortable with it. I think you know it's dry now. I'll be careful. There might be a couple of greasy spots out there, but no, it's dry. You know. And
I think from the front as well, you're hopefully not having to do a lot of overtaking, so you're not coming off the racing line to do that, and exactly. You put yourself in the best possible position. All the best for that first heat. We'll head over here as well because we've got one driver who has taken the risk onto the wet tyre. So Oliver Owen, the 318, is the only driver, I think, onto the wet tyre. Oliver, talk to us about this decision. Talk to us about the reason that you've gone for the wet tyre.
Well, we're just going for it to see what happens because it's still greasy out there, and we're not sure about the weather, so there's got to be someone that does it.
You're looking at the clouds like me, and I suppose you're taking the same risk that a couple of the DRS62s went, where you might as well have a go. You might as well see what happens. If we do get a bit of a shower, there's some fairly ominous looking clouds around still, so you know, I suppose you've got to try and be as smooth as you can and keep as little heat into these tyres as possible.
Yeah, and also in the final, my tyres will be brand new, so I'll have an extra race on everyone else. So
absolutely, almost sacrificing a heat, aren't you, to have that, you know, that more life in the tyres when it comes down to it later on. We wish you all the best. Some interesting strategies, some interesting tactics. Just shows you the breadth of the competition and the breadth of the things you need to consider as a driver in this series. I just want to try and grab a very quick chat, if I can, with Sam Faulkner. He's just chatting to the pole man at the moment. Sam looked to me like a chain. Who's responsible for a chain coming off?
Probably me, I imagine. But I'm not sure how, because it was a left-hander. So
yeah, well, that's what I said. It said you hadn't hit a curb or anything like that. It just seemed to lose drive.
I was hitting curbs going around the track, but I don't really know. But the problem was in that session, whatever the last lap was going to be quickest. So yeah. So missing 4 minutes of it didn't really help. But yeah, it's still okay.
So a little bit of work to do, but yeah, a few to navigate the way around, and a different complexion now with a slick tyre.
Yeah, because yesterday was really grippy, so it'd be interesting to see if the track is different today. It should be, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see what new slicks are like for everyone.
Yep. All the best. So some interesting movement from a little bit further down the grid as well. Expect the likes of Sam Faulkner to try and want to fight his way through this field, and this could be a very interesting race indeed. If this is the first two are anything to go by, we're in for a cracker of a day's racing. We'll be back in just a few moments with the first heat for the DRS 125s. So drivers are just around about leaving the dummy grid. One that was a little bit slow getting away, which was the number 8 of Elliott Stanley. So really interesting, obviously a wet qualifying, a dry first race. And as we spoke to the likes of Mark Lawrence, he said that the dry was no good for him. Let's see how he fares in the opening stage of this race. What these drivers will be very keen to do is to get some heat into these tyres as quickly as they possibly can do. This is the first time they have been on these tyres. So they'll get a couple of formation laps to get some heat into the tyres to allow themselves to make all the operating temperatures the way that they should be. So Sam Faulkner is the championship leader, but he starts on the inside of the third row here. As he said on the grid, it was going to be whoever put their last flying lap in last was probably going to be the best placed. But for Mark Lawrence down in 13th in the championship, this will be a handful of points that will be very welcome. And here they come then. Can Lawrence get into the first corner first? They're well formed and they do go first time. Lawrence, I think, has got the jump, although around the outside tries to go Matthew Pearce. It is Lawrence who leads them. They all squirm onto the rumble strip on the exit and head up the hill for the first time. Into the right-hander at Christmas Corner. And the other driver to keep an eye on here is the 318 of Oliver Owen. He's the only driver on the wet tyres. I would suggest that they're probably not working for him already. He's at the back of the field, but he's still got a kart between him and last place, which is Tommy Welsh. Into the left. Now, can Lawrence hold on for the first lap? He looks over his right shoulder. Into the bootleg for the first time. They're all concertinaed up very closely. There's Faulkner goes down the inside of Pearce, and Faulkner, ever the opportunist, just ducks down the inside into the bootleg, and he's up into second. Third place is Elliott Stanley. Through the first turn they go, and look at the time that Faulkner's managed to take out of Lawrence. He goes to the inside, Lawrence covers it off. See, Lawrence is going to back all these karts up now, and he's got the absolute right to do it. Faulkner a little bit wide into a little bit sideways, but Lawrence is very sideways and makes a mistake coming through the right-hander of the Ashby corner, and Lawrence has given that lead up to Sam Faulkner. Faulkner now then stretches his legs at the front, and Lawrence just holding back the advances of the likes of Stanley, Snape, Pearce, Dave Burns is in there as well. This gaggle of karts in the battle for second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth and seventh. The 316 of Jake Rigg is there as well. I'm just looking back to see what has happened to Oliver Owen. He is 8th, so Oliver Owen on those wet tyres. Sunshine at the moment is exactly what he didn't want to happen, as the leader is through the Ashby corner. Here is the new second place man, which is Matthew Pearce. So Pearce into second through the double apex left-hander. Third place is now the 5 of Tom Snape. Into the bootleg they go, and then into paddock corner comes Faulkner. What a good job he's done in just being patient for the first lap or two. He's now got himself a very handsome lead over Pearce. We will have a look at the lap times between them. We've got one retirement, which is 319 of Tommy Welsh. Welsh is just being pushed over start finish. He'll take no further part in this first heat. In fact, they're going to get that all the way back into the paddock. Just pushing it into the dummy grid entry at the moment. So then, let's just keep an eye on the times between Sam Faulkner and Matthew Pearce. Sam Faulkner's done a 46.334 last time round, whereas Matthew Pearce a 47.126, so there's 0.8 of a second between them. This is probably the first lap they've both had clear air. Let's see what the difference is between the front two now. Over start finish goes Faulkner, 46.3, 46.8 for Pearce, so he's still giving away half a second or so. The gap on the road is 3 seconds, so no real issue for Faulkner at the moment. There's a warning for the 2.8. Warning for Faulkner. Track limits. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? Because it happened to Bartle and he got a penalty in the DRS62. That is the first warning for Sam Faulkner for track limits. Is it due down to the Ashby corner again? We'll have a look next time round. This battle continues for second, third and fourth. It's still led by Pearce. It's still Elliott Stanley in behind him and then Tom Snape behind them. So there goes the leader to complete another lap. Second, third and fourth are through as well. And then it's the 197 of Dave Burns. Cal Watt is 6th. Jack Rigg is 7th. Oliver Owen has just crossed the line now. So Oliver Owen's wet tyres are costing him just around about 2 seconds a lap at the moment. So it's a risk, but probably a risk worth taking if he didn't feel, certainly on the dry tyres, or he certainly feels that later on in the day, certainly for the final later on, he's going to have the freshest tyres by around about 10 minutes. So that might stand him in good stead, and we'll keep an eye on that, especially in a small field as well. Could put him in a really good place come 4 o'clock this afternoon. Faulkner then leads and is through to complete another lap. No change in this battle for second, third and fourth. Pearce, Stanley and Snape. Lap times between first and second are, well, there's 4/10 or so in it. A 46.1 for Faulkner, a 46.5 for Matthew Pearce. So Sam Faulkner certainly blazing a trail at the moment. He's very wide again, isn't he? Very, very wide through the Ashby corner. And when you've got this sort of lead, does he really need to be risking another track limits warning? I won't be surprised if he gets one, because just through the Ashby corner, he's very, very, all 4 wheels of that DRS kart are off the, or behind, or past the white line. Let's just keep an eye on Faulkner here again as he goes up to the Ashby corner. He's done 7 laps now. 46.1 was his last lap time. There's your second place driver, Matthew Pearce, who looks like he's just got enough to keep Elliott Stanley at bay. I'm just keeping an eye on Faulkner now because he's just come up to the Ashby corner again. How wide does he go here? Now, better. Probably better. He probably had 2 wheels on the actual track that time, so I think he'll probably be okay last time round. And he's listen, he's an experienced campaigner, he's Sam Faulkner. He knows exactly what he'll need to do. And these drivers will keep an eye on what's happening in the other categories as well, so they'll probably be aware that Harry Bartle suffered a penalty for track limits at the Ashby corner. We've got just around about 90 seconds of this first DRS125 heat still to go. And Faulkner it is who leads. Here he is now. This is the corner of... Oh, he's off again there, isn't he? He's certainly all 4 wheels off that time, Sam Faulkner. He's running a bit of a risk here that he probably doesn't need to make. He's got a really handsome lead over the battle for second, which has just had a change. So Stanley goes up the inside, and Matthew Pearce also receives a track limit warning and a second track limit warning now for Faulkner. Surely now, he's got such a lead, he doesn't need to do that again in the Ashby corner. He's probably got 1 more lap to go after this one. Don't run the risk of ruining a handsome lead with just dropping wheels off the track as you go through the Ashby corner. It is a tough corner, it's off camber. Here he is now. Faulkner's coming up to it now. Let's just have a look. The second one he's had. What does he do now? Yeah, he's okay. That time he's okay. He's probably got to do that once more just to make sure he doesn't get any further trouble. So then, for a lot of this race, Matthew Pearce held that second place. It's now in the hands of Elliott Stanley. Stanley up into second. Pearce now has to turn his attention to the number 5 of Tom Snape, and just keep an eye on Dave Burns as well, because Dave Burns has just cruised onto the back of this gaggle of karts for second, third and fourth, and he is lapping around about 2, 3 tenths of a second faster than that battle as well. So keep an eye on Burns, especially if these three start to squabble in the closing stages. Are we on the last lap? I think oh no, we're just coming up to the last lap now. So this time, Faulkner will get a last lap ball. There's a track limits warning for the 197 of Dave Burns. So Burns, who is pushing hard to keep on terms with this battle for second, third and fourth. Here is Faulkner then. He's probably going to have, well, he is going to have one more lap to go, is he? Yes, final lap then for Sam Faulkner. Just keep an eye on him as he goes through the Ashby corner as well. He's had 2 track warnings limits, doesn't need to do anything silly now. He can cruise round and still win this race. Battle for second continues to rage. Here it comes, Faulkner. Ooh, he's really close, isn't he? There, he's really close to. I think he's certainly got all 4 wheels off the circuit there, and it's maybe something that he just needs to address before he comes out for the pre-final, because if he continues to do that, he does run the risk of a penalty. But Faulkner's going to win then. Comes round the bootleg for the final time into paddock corner. Faulkner wins. Here is the battle for second, third and fourth. Absolutely anything between these two, and there is a change. There is a change because down the inside goes Pierce. Was there a little bit of contact between Pierce and Elliot Stanley? Stanley certainly ran wide, and Tom Snape jumped down the inside as well. Dave Burns did come home in 5th. There was an incident over the last couple of corners as well for the 298 of Carl Watt. So Watt came home in 7th. Oliver Owen is going to come home in 8th with, I would imagine, some wet tyres that are looking a little bit more like slicks at the moment. They will be very worn indeed. He shakes his head as if to say that was a wrong decision, wasn't it? But you won't buy a ticket, you don't win the raffle. And Sam Faulkner was patient in the opening couple of laps, ran a couple of risks with the track limits, and we've got Matthew Pearce under investigation as well. So the officials are going to have a look at that move on the final couple of corners that involved Pearce, Snape and Stanley. Stanley demoted down from 2nd to 4th. Some very close racing indeed. So the officials will look at that. We will see what the outcome is in the near future. What we've got now is a chance to turn our attention to the DRS125s. They're due off around 20 past. So we'll head back to you in around about 5 or 10 minutes time, and we'll be down on the dummy grid with a chat with a few of the junior drivers. We will see you in just a few moments. Welcome back to round 4 of the DRS series here at Whilton Mill. We're with our senior class, the DRS125s. The drivers are just about sorting themselves out, ready for the start. We'll head over to the outside of the front row first. We'll head over and speak to Elliot Stanley if we possibly can do. Elliot, manic was the first race. I think it's fair to say there was a lot went on. You've come out of that on the front row. That must be a fairly pleasing result.
Yeah, it's a positive result for the first race. Hopefully continue going forward, win the next one.
And obviously the weather, the change in weather, you guys have had two sessions out on the slick tyres now. Obviously the gap between, I know we've got the sort of runaway winner from the first one is now back third on the grid. How do you go about closing that gap if he gets out front again? How do you go about preventing that big gap from appearing?
I think just try and follow him. It's hard, he is so quick, but it's definitely, we were matching his times yesterday, so there's definitely a chance today.
And it's one of those circuits, isn't it, where it's high speed straights, it's fairly low speed corners. You know, if you can get tucked up in behind someone, there is an advantage, isn't there, from being in behind?
Yeah, the slipstream round here is very advantageous. We're running a short flex this weekend, so we're very quick up the end of the straights, in the hope that we can get past coming up the end of the straight. So.
Great stuff. Right, we wish you all the best. And an interesting point there about setup. So obviously the drivers and the mechanics and parents and people who are involved have the opportunity to make those little changes to the setup to try and make sure they're either great at the top of the straight, or they might be great coming out the corners. They can make those little amendments and see where they want their maximum advantage from the equipment, if you like. So yeah, lots of little bits of tactics we've talked about before that go on here. We're just going to head over to the other side of the front row and probably ask the same questions, because it's the same stuff that's sort of happening. Tom, just briefly, we talked a moment ago, Elliot, about the first race being frantic. It was a lot going on out there. Obviously, you've come out of that on the front row of the grid. That's a positive result.
Yeah, definitely. I wasn't expecting it at all, really. Obviously, we had a few penalties with Matt and Sam. So, yeah, I've ended up on P1.
I want to talk about track limits because we've seen a little bit of it this morning with the DRS62s and obviously with the DRS125s. How tough is it when you come down the hill and it's off camber to keep all four wheels, or at least two wheels, still on the tarmac before the white line?
Yeah, it is really difficult, especially in these conditions as well. Late break, and you've got to keep the momentum going, so you haven't really got a choice but to go wide.
I suppose that's the argument, isn't it? You're trying to push, you're trying to get everything out of the kart that you can, and to push sometimes it takes you past those track limits. In terms of this race, what's the strategy? Is it a key of getting yourself out front, getting your head down, let them squabble in behind you and try and get that little advantage early on?
Yeah, well, I'm at the front, so I've got the advantage of having a clear track, so no collisions or anything happening in front of me. So yeah, just head down, flat out, really.
Good. We wish you all the best. So again, we talked about strategy, we talked about setup, we talked about the different options that these guys have. The other thing is the strategy of the race itself. So drivers off the front row will want to try and hit the front early. They'll want to try and get that clear air, because races can very much be won in the first 2 laps of the race. If you're out front and you've pulled a gap and these guys are all falling over each other, yeah, you put yourself in a great position to let them do all the running from that. And that's pretty much what Sam Faulkner did in the first race. He bided his time on lap 1 and 2. He found a way past. He pulled a big gap, and everybody else behind started to fall over each other. So it'll be an interesting race. So obviously we've got Sam who won that first race and had a penalty from there. So he's now on the inside of the front row. So keep an eye on the 283. Keep an eye on the number 2 of Matthew Pearce as well. We've got a lot of competitive drivers in this DRS125 category. And really, it's very, very difficult to predict in these early stages as well. So we'll be back in a few moments' time with hopefully a repetition of what's been some very close racing so far with the DRS125s. We'll see you soon. Our senior drivers are on circuit, the DRS 125s, for their pre-final 8 minutes plus a lap of this Whilton Mill circuit. And they're led out this time by Tom Snape. He was the beneficiary of a couple of penalties, has to be said, in the first heat. A penalty for track limits for Sam Faulkner, I think, or was it for the contact potentially in the early stage of the race? But Sam Faulkner, who won on circuit the first heat, now finds himself 3rd on the grid, and behind Tom Snape and Elliot Stanley, the number 8, who starts on the outside of the front row. Behind him is the number 2, last year's vice champion Matthew Pearce, and Dave Burns, Carl Watt, Jack Rigg, Mark Lawrence, who certainly didn't have the race that he would have wanted from pole position. I think he threw a chain off in the early stages of the first heat and didn't manage to finish the race. Neither did Tommy Welsh either, and they both start at the back of the field. They're all stretching their legs at the moment and just trying to get as much heat as possible into those Vega tyres. Ensure that when the lights do go green, they've got the maximum traction, maximum heat into the brakes that they can have. So it's a small but a really high quality field here. 10 drivers, 10 DRS 125 drivers. So Snape and Stanley, 1st and 2nd going into the first corner. Keep an eye on Faulkner, championship leader, 283 on the outside, on the inside of the second row. They're formed fairly well. Here we go then. Lights are on red. Looks pretty good. It is good, and they're away first time. And Faulkner jumps straight into second behind Tom Snape, who makes the most of his pole position. He's under pressure from Faulkner as well as they go up the hill for the first time. He closes the door on Sam Faulkner, and round the outside of Faulkner goes the two of Matthew Pearce into Inkermans and down towards the right-hander for the first time. A little bit of understeer from Tom Snape as he just manages to get enough heat into tyre, or wrestles with the heat in the front tyres. They're round the Chapman curve and down towards the boot for the first time. A little bit tidier from Faulkner than Snape. A little bit loose, a little bit wide from Tom Snape, and he's under some pressure here as they cross the line for the end of the first lap. Elliot Stanley is in third place. Matthew Pearce and Dave Burns, Carl Watt, Oliver Owen, who will be on these slick tyres for the first time, as here comes Faulkner down the inside, leaves it late, and through as well goes Elliot Stanley. So it's first to second and third into second as they went through the Christmas corner. So now then, we spoke to Elliot Stanley about the need to keep hold of Sam Faulkner. He said that he was doing similar times yesterday. He said it was important to try and stay in touch, try and chase him, try and follow him. Well, these next couple of laps are going to be absolutely key here. Over start finish they go to start one more lap. Faulkner, Stanley, Snape, Pearce, Burns, Watt, Owen, Rigg, Lawrence and Welsh. They're all still in this race, all 10 drivers, and we have a new leader. And what a good strategy then that might be from Elliot Stanley, because that was what I was expecting to say. I was expecting to say, well, if we stay behind him, we run the risk of him disappearing, so let's attack him, let's try and get past him. And that's exactly what Elliot Stanley has done as they go through Chapman's once more along this short back straight. Faulkner is there or thereabouts as they go into the boot left and then swing over to the left hand side to go right, and Pearce makes a pretty opportunistic lunge down the inside of Tom Snape, nothing doing there, and now he's managed to get back on terms with the third place number 5. Up the hill they go then. Elliot Stanley keeping Sam Faulkner behind in second place. A warning for 316, which is Jack Rigg, and a warning for Matthew Pearce, both for track limits by the looks of it. Into the left-hander at Chapman's. A little bit ragged from Stanley. Caught a couple of rumble strips, caught some of the curb, and he's got Faulkner now tucked up right behind him as they go through the left and the right of the boot. Down towards pit corner, which is where they are now. They all just about manage to avoid the curb, and Snape goes very, very, very wide on the way through. And that allows for Matthew Pearce to sneak up the inside and take third place away from Tom Snape. So Pearce then up into third. Up the hill they come then. Can he find a way past Faulkner? Has Faulkner got to find a way past Stanley to stop him coming under pressure from the third place driver, Matthew Pearce, who now has a penalty. So a penalty for Matthew Pearce. Is that for track limits, or is it for contact for Matthew Pearce? There was maybe a little bit of contact that might have resulted in Tom Snape running wide through paddock last time round. But whatever happens now, Matthew Pearce is going to receive a penalty at the end of this race. Over start-finish line they come once more. Has he seen it? I'll be surprised if they don't look up to the board as they go past start-finish. But there was no reaction from Matthew Pearce. Up towards the Christmas corner once more. Then left through the loop and then right through Inkermans again. Flat out through there. So track limits for Jack Rigg, the 316, and track limits for Oliver Owen as well, the 318. They're not a million miles out of this, are they? If you look at the group of karts all the way up to 8th place, Jack Rigg, they're all within maybe 10, 15 kart lengths of the race leader. That race leader is Elliot Stanley. Matthew Pearce then, track limits again And Snape is now past Matthew Pearce. So it's all change for third, fourth. Dave Burns is still fifth. And up the hill go the race leaders. Still no change. Now does Faulkner just sit there for a lap or two? Try and plot his way past Elliott Stanley. He's got a nice comfortable cushion behind him. Not really under much pressure from the rear. And again, track limits for Oliver Owen. A lot of drivers really struggling to adhere to the limits of this Whilton Mill track. Here come the front two to complete another lap. We've got 2.5 minutes left of this race, plus that one final lap as they head up the hill. Is this the best chance for Sam Faulkner? Mind you, remember what Elliott Stanley said, that they had set that kart up to come on at the top of the straight, to be at its maximum at the top of the long straights here. So as long as he can keep Sam Faulkner at bay on the way out of the corners, or the way into the corners, he should have enough when they get up to, or at the end of the long drive, to the next section of the circuit. It certainly looks that way at the moment, doesn't it? Faulkner probably a little bit tidier. He certainly gets on terms with Stanley as they go through the twists and turns. He's very wide there, is Sam Faulkner, on the way out of paddock. And that's cost him a couple of kart lengths, and Elliott Stanley has a little look over his right shoulder. You'll see that Faulkner is there or thereabouts, but maybe not quite right on the bumper as he has been before. They go through the right-hander, they then head towards the left of Parker, then down the hill towards the left of Chapman's. 1 minute or so still remaining in this race, and if anything, Elliott Stanley's just holding him at arm's length, isn't he? He's just doing enough at the moment to stop him from attacking as they go around this Whilton Mill circuit. Just over 1,000 metres. It takes them around 45 seconds or so to complete a lap around here. And they're heading up the hill once more. Has Faulkner run out of gas here? Has he got any answers? Has he got any way to find a method of overtaking the race leader, Elliott Stanley? They don't have a lap, have they? 40 seconds? No, they're probably going to have 2 more after this. Another track limits warning for Oliver Owen. I'm not sure how many of those he will be allowed in the remaining lap or so here. Stanley starts to go on the defensive, just narrowed off to the inside line as they went along the back straight. Is now into paddock corner, clips the rumble strip, heads down. How long left? 16 seconds, so 2 laps from here. Next time round will be the last lap. I think he's got the measure, hasn't he, Elliott Stanley, at the moment, of Faulkner. Faulkner can't catch him in a straight line. He is a little bit better through the tight, twisty sections. But then Elliott Stanley extends his advantage, stretches his legs on the way out, and certainly top-end speed from Elliott Stanley has kept Sam Faulkner at bay. Snape is a further 4 or 5 kart lengths back, as is Matthew Pearce in 4th. Burns further back in 5th. Then a gap to Carl Watt and Oliver Owen. Here are the leaders then. 1 lap to go. Has Sam Faulkner got anything up his sleeve? Can he find a way? He's a little bit closer than he was last time round as they go up the hill. Can he get a toe up the hill? He can, but not close enough to make a move. He's going to run out of corners here. He is very quick through Inkermans. He's quick down into this right-hander as well. This is where he took a lot of the curb. A lot of the rumble strip was exceeding the track limits in the heat this morning. Has he got anything into the boot? That may be his only opportunity here. But again, Elliott Stanley has done enough just to keep him at bay. No pressure now, really, on Elliott Stanley. Just navigate these last couple of corners. Take the right of pit corner, and he has done a sterling job. Elliott Stanley then comes home to win the pre-final for the DRS125. Sam Faulkner finishing in 2nd. Tom Snape is 3rd. Matthew Pearce is 4th. Dave Burns is 5th. And Carl Watt comes home in 6th. The rest of the drivers have just streamed through now, including Oliver Owen in 7th, Jack Rigg in 8th, Tommy Welsh in 9th, and Mark Lawrence came home at the back of the field. So Elliott Stanley then is the winner of the DRS125 pre-final. They'll start on the front row of the main final along with Sam Faulkner. And very, very little between them. Could be a cracker come 4:05 this afternoon. We can now turn our attention to the 3:15 race, which is the DRS 100 pre-final. We'll be back in a moment for all the action here from round 4 of the Daniel Ricciardo Series. So 1 down, 2 to go in terms of our grand finals, and this time it's from our youngest to our oldest competitors. The DRS 125s are on the grid. I'm going to try and grab a chat with a couple of them. I'm going to go to Elliot Stanley again first, because he told me how quick Sam Faulkner was, and then blew him away in the pre-final. So he's put himself in the best possible position. We'll go over to him now and just get his thoughts. I was saying earlier that you told us how quick Sam was, and then you managed to outpace him in the pre-final.
Only just. It was
just
close.
is enough though.
Yeah, it was a good race. I quite enjoyed battling with him, to be honest. It was really quite fun.
And as you said, for me, when you're talking about top-end speed, there were the areas where you actually just extended the advantage. And although he was maybe a little bit quicker through some of the tighter sections, you still had that little bit of an advantage every time you went to the top end of the hill. So therefore, he spent the rest of the lap catching up, and he couldn't quite get there.
Yeah, it was good tactic to have. I think he's changed stuff now to maybe try and negate that advantage that I had up the hill. But hopefully it swings the other way now, and we kind of level out with each other.
Let's go and find out. Thank you very much, Elliot. We'll just try and grab a very, very quick word with Sam Faulkner, if I can just nip in here. Sam, you spent 3/4 of the lap trying to get back on terms with him, only to watch him disappear at the top of the hill. So what did you do differently to stop that?
We tried to get some more straight line speed out of it, but yeah, I forgot really that here the main overtaking spot is into Christmas, and so the rest of the lap almost doesn't matter really. If you're quick up the straight, you're pretty fine. So yeah, hopefully this one's a bit different, but yeah, starting third, so well, we'll see what happens into the first corner.
Good man. We'll leave them to it, because I know we are slightly behind schedule, and they are very keen to get underway. It'll be very interesting to see as well how much the track limits has affected Sam Faulkner from that first heat this morning. He got caught under track limits a couple of times and has maybe had to change his line into the right-hander. The DRS 125s, the engines are on, and we are about to get underway with our second final of the day. So it's been an intriguing day for the DRS 125 drivers. A bit of cat and mouse with them, there's no doubt about that. There's a little bit of gamesmanship goes on here. It was, really interesting how Elliot Stanley had said that Sam Faulkner was almost just too quick, just had too much pace for him. But then they found a setup which allowed them to effectively manage Sam Faulkner's pace if they could get in front and ahead of him, which is what they managed to do in that pre-final. What response has Sam Faulkner got? And as we said on the grid, what sort of impact is the fact that Sam Faulkner clearly needs to be a little bit more careful as he goes around the Ashby corner? This right-hander the drivers are just going through now, because he was going outside the track limits in the first of the heats earlier on this morning. Has that lost him a little bit of time overall? This is intriguing. I do think the strategy for Elliot Stanley and Tom Snape and those around, Matthew Pearce especially, you've got to probably keep Sam Faulkner behind. You've probably got to keep him at bay. You've probably got to make him work a little bit harder from behind you than let him get out in front and let him get that clear air and let him, link a couple of corners together and get himself a kart length or two's advantage. And then it doesn't matter how good you are at the top end of the circuit, because he's just going to take the time out of you again through the tighter sections of the lap. So This will be interesting, and we are off and away, and Elliot Stanley has got the best of it, has he? Ooh, has he? He's going round the outside. I think he just manages to hold on. He come under extreme pressure from Tom Snape as they went through that right-hander, and again, there's pressure from Faulkner as well. I think Faulkner's going to second. We've got a spinner, which is the 197 Dave Burns. So Dave Burns is now out to the back of the field. Leader then is Stanley, second place, and here is that spin. Look through the mid-pack here. Oh, just tags the back. Oh, I think it was actually Oliver Owen who tags the back of Jack Rigg, who then hits the back of Dave Burns. So there was 3 of them involved. A little bit of a concertina effect as they went through Christmas on that previous lap. Here are your race leaders. We've got 12 minutes plus a lap of this DRS125 action as they all try and sort themselves out into some sort of order. Now, the interesting thing here will be the drivers in 3rd and 4th. So Pierce and Snape will be very, very keen not to drop off the back of this battle for the lead. And there's a change in the lead. Faulkner down the inside into the right-hander at Ashbury. Now then, this is interesting. I think Stanley has to attack. I think he has to get himself back on terms. I think he has to try and find a way to make Sam Faulkner work and not let him get away at the front of this field, which he's just starting to do, isn't he, through the tighter sections. Here is the move. He got a good run out of the right-hander, went into Asprey and made it stick down the inside. He took all the track, didn't he? He actually made it by going off track limits. We've talked about it all day, haven't we? But that was the manoeuvre. Suppose in a Formula 1 car, they might make him give that back if that was if he'd used more of the track than he was meant to. So Faulkner has 2 kart lengths. That could be enough. If he can put together now a couple of really consistently quick lap times, what Elliot Stanley can't do is he can't focus too much on Matthew Pearce. He keeps looking over his shoulder to Matthew Pearce. He really needs to be absolutely pinpoint perfect to stay on terms with the race leader. Faulkner then. 46 flat for Faulkner, 46.1 for Stanley, 46.1 for Matthew Pearce, 46.2 for Tom Snape, and that is the story of the race so far. Stanley about 1/10 of a second slower than the race leader, and that's showing in terms of track position as well. The gap between them is around about 2 or 3 kart lengths. We've got an investigation on 316, which is Jack Rigg, currently in 7th place. The gap between the front 2 is extending, and this was the risk. Faulkner gets out in front, let him get free air, you don't attack him straight away, you don't counter-attack him, and he disappears in the distance. That is what has happened so far. 46 flat for Faulkner, very consistent. He's done 2 laps within 0.03 of a second of each other. 2/10 further back is Elliot Stanley. Another 10th further back, Matthew Pearce. In fact, Pearce has done a 46.1 and Tom Snape a 46.1.22. That is his fastest lap of the race so far. Leaders then. Need a little reaction here from Elliot Stanley. The gap was half a second last time. What is the gap this time round as they head towards start-finish once more? The gap is down a little bit. 45.9 for Elliot Stanley is his fastest and the fastest lap of the race so far. So Stanley in 2nd place. Faulkner leads. Pearce is 3rd. He's coming back at him a little bit, isn't he, Elliot Stanley? Just a couple of really good corners, a half-decent lap. Just shook off the pressure from Matthew Pearce. This is certainly what we want from a neutral's perspective, a challenge to that leader as Tommy Welsh goes under investigation as well. The 319 for something untoward. Faulkner and Stanley. What sort of response has Sam Faulkner got to Elliot Stanley? Where is Elliot Stanley? He's gone in. Elliot Stanley's just driven at the pits. Elliot Stanley has gone. What has happened there? So Elliot Stanley literally came round the boot, pulled over into the pits and has retired. What has happened there? Interesting stuff. Here are, well, now it's a different dynamic, because now Sam Faulkner will know that probably his biggest threat has gone. The threat now is in the shape of the number 2 of Matthew Pearce. Can Pearce close this gap? We'll get a good idea of what it exactly is. It was 900ths of a, it was just below a second last time round. Right, what's Matthew Pearce got in his locker? The gap down very, very slightly. Matthew Pearce just on the fastest lap of the race. So Matthew Pearce getting rid of Elliott Stanley has given him a little bit more impetus, just giving him a little bit of motivation, just giving him a little chippy along to try and get on terms with Sam Faulkner. He's going to need to do that lap after lap after lap. He's going to have to chip away at this advantage, because the 283 leads this race. As we said, his main opposition, Elliott Stanley, is gone, parked up, not continuing, out of the race. Won't take any championship points from it either, which will be a double blow for Elliott Stanley. What's the gap now? Oh, he's taking another half a tenth out of him. And he'll know this. Matthew Pearce will be well aware that he's just chipping away, that the gap is just coming down ever so slightly. But Elliott Stanley, who will have to drop from his points that DNF from today. Puts a little bit more pressure on in terms of the championship. Only 23 points behind Sam Faulkner. Sam Faulkner it is who is out front at the moment. The gap between himself and Matthew Pearce was 9/10 of a second. So Faulkner, who won the final, didn't actually do the first race at Houghton Park. He wasn't there, but he did the race at Rissington. He did the race at Clay Pigeon and won both of them. That also means that he's under a little pressure not to drop any silly points, because he'd have to count them as well. Faulkner then, the gap is still 9/10. If anything, he took a couple of hundreds back from Matthew Pearce that last lap. Cal Watt up to 4th. Oliver Owen is up into 5th, and Jack Rigg is 6th. Dave Burns recovering up to 7th place, and then it's Tommy Welsh, and then it's Mark Lawrence. And then the retirement of Elliott Stanley, who only did 5 laps of this race. Here are your leaders once more. Let's check on the gap. 0.994 last time round. Is it over a second? No. It's the same, unless my timing screen has not updated in front of me. It was 0.994, it's now 0.980, so it is actually down, but only by a couple of hundredths of a second, and that will not be enough. Matthew Pearce needs to find something else here. He needs to find another couple of tenths. If he can put 2 tenths into Sam Faulkner every lap, he'll be there in 3-4 laps, which is probably what he's got left. He's probably got 5 left here. 0.980, just under a second is the gap between the two. Faulkner can't afford any mistakes either. Very wide goes Matthew Pearce on the way over start finish. The gap is now over a second. So is that the turning point? Is that the turning point when the gap has been extended to just over a second on that previous lap? And has he broken the resolve of second place Matthew Pearce? Tom Snape is still there in 3rd, but he just can't get on terms either, can he, with the second place man? A little bit processional from these 3, but don't deny the quality that we're seeing in terms of consistency, in terms of maintaining a pace and a speed, because Sam Faulkner is doing a very, very good job at it at the moment. The gap is still around a second between the two of them. They head up towards Christmas once more. Fastest lap of the race so far still belongs to Sam Faulkner, 45.837. You compare that to the rest of them, there's 3 drivers that all these front 3 all have ducked under the 46-second barrier at some point during this race. Track limits warning for 318 Oliver Owen. And over start finish they go once more. So Faulkner, and then Pierce, and then Snape, and then Watt, and Oliver Owen, who gets another track limits warning this time round. He's closely followed by Jack Rigg, all looking for a top 5 at least. Podium looks like it's decided, unless there's something really untoward to happen in the last 90 seconds or so of this race. We are heading for another Sam Faulkner victory. Dave Burns now under investigation for something in those last few laps as well. This is the battle for 4th, 5th and 6th. And the gap between the leaders is now back down to under a second, but it's not going to be enough. He's now going to need to take at least 4/10 out of him per lap. And if anything, Snape is now closer to Pierce than he has been. And Snape has just done the fastest lap, 45.774 for Tom Snape. So he's come on really strong at the end of this race. Leaders then, and there is Snape down the inside. So Snape has now taken away that second place from Matthew Pierce, who's held it for the lion's share of this race, certainly since Elliot Stanley retired after 5 laps or so. Now then, I don't suppose that Tom Snape has got 6-7 tenths a lap ability to go quicker than Sam Faulkner and give us a real grandstand finish to end this day. Let's just have a quick look. I would imagine not, but let's just see how he can progress. The gap between Faulkner and Snape was 1 second, more or less exactly. Track limits for 2 and 5, so Snape and Pierce, while they've been squabbling over second place, have actually been extended further than the track limits. Let's just have a look at this gap. So this will be the last lap this time. Is there something really special that Tom Snape could do here? I think he has closed the gap a little bit. It was just around about a second, but Sam Faulkner still doesn't really look like he's trouble. Certainly no urgency from him. He's a very laid-back kind of guy, as it is anyway. Over the line, the gap is 9 tenths. It's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough for Tom Snape. And Sam Faulkner just needs to keep everything pointing in the right direction, needs to keep consistent, needs to avoid some of the major curbs here that can be a problem. He did shed a chain, didn't he, in qualifying? Just avoid some of those curbs, avoid the track limits warnings. He's not had one, I don't think, in this final. He's got 3 corners left to go. He's round Chapman's on the back straight. He's coming into the boot for the final time. The gap has certainly come down, but it's too little too late for Tom Snape because Sam Faulkner has 1 more corner to go. He's into it now and down the long start finish straight here. Sam Faulkner wins round 4 of the Daniel Ricciardo Series here at Whilton Mill. Tom Snape is second, Matthew Pierce is third, Carl Watt is fourth. Oliver Owen is just about to come through, just ahead of Jack Rigg into 5th. Dave Burns recovers into 7th. Tommy Walsh finishes in 8th, and the last runner is Mark Lawrence, who is just coming over start finish. Now we'll be back with you on the dummy grid in just a moment's time for our last race of the day, the DRS 100 main final. Welcome back to round 4 of the Daniel Ricciardo Series here at Whilton Mill in Northampton. We're about to get underway with the trophy presentation. We'll start with the DRS 62s. Another excellent weekend of super close racing here at Whilton Mill. And a pleasure again to see so many drivers. In fact, we talked about it in the commentary that up until the finals, we had a different winner or a different poleman for every single event that the drivers took part in today. So another great advert for Daniel Ricciardo Series Racing. We'll start with the DRS 62s and our top 3 then. In 3rd place, number 4, Jack Robinson. In 2nd place, and our top rookie for the DRS 62 is number 120, Oscar Walsh. And today's winner, putting himself right back in the hunt for the championship as well, number 6, Harry Bartle. Ladies and gentlemen, your DRS 62 top 3. Well done, guys. We move on to our DRS 125 class, our senior drivers. In 3rd place, number 2, Matthew Pearce. In 2nd place, number 5, Tom Snape. And today's winner didn't have it all his own way in the pre-final, but made sure he did the job in the grand final. Number 283, Sam Faulkner. Ladies and gentlemen, the DRS 125 top 3. Yeah, you can go. And finally, the DRS 100. Fair to say that probably one of the best races I have seen for a long, long time. We'll start with our top rookie in 9th place, the number 143 of Daniela Sutton. Your top 3 then, and as we said, probably the one of the best we've seen, certainly this season from a DRS perspective. The lead changed, I think, 3 times on the last lap, and there was incident clearly on the way up to that last lap as well. A fantastic advert for the series and a fantastic advert for young drivers and the capability to provide excellent entertainment on a circuit like this. In 3rd place, number 5, Dylan Briley. 2nd place, our championship leader, number 108, Rowan Campbell-Pilling. And I said in the commentary that if he was a footballer, we'd probably say he likes to put his foot in, or he likes to tackle. But certainly a young man who knows how to make overtaking manoeuvres, and they've worked for him today. The number 135 is our winner, Maximilian Salarski. Ladies and gents, your DRS 100 top 3. And that's all then from round 4 of the Daniel Ricciardo Series here at Whilton Mill. In just 2 weeks' time, we'll be back on the road again. We'll be back at Little Rissington for round number 5, and we hope you'll be there to join us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.